Yes. Yes, I think we'll get a little bit deeper into that later, but thank you for your thorough and impactful words. So, expanding on what Sikowis said, they talked a little bit about colonial capitalism. And as they said, that's something that has affected our whole nation. And so, a lot of the issues we're presenting today are these large scale, ubiquitous issues that really affect everyone. When we talk about the North Omaha coal power plant or the meat packing plant in South Omaha, even things like industrial facilities, the number one determinant in America for where these are placed is race. So a lot of these issues are very large scale. And so I want to ask our panelists, how do you balance your scales of advocacy? So we're all involved in like community work, obviously, but how do you balance sort of community work with regional work, with even nationwide work? How do you see value within your communities, but also see it function beyond that?
I'm laughing because I don't do a very good job of it. I start out that I have my schedule. Okay, I'm going to spend X amount of time today on something that's national. I have a YouTube channel, Conversations with Cheryl Weston, and I say I'm going to do 2 hours of it, and I'm going to focus that today. I'm going to focus on what's happening in Omaha, and then I'll say, and I'm going to spend a couple hours here on Facebook because I have Conversations with Cheryl Weston on Facebook. So that I try to deal with combination of local and national. And then I'm like, okay, at this point, I'm going to cut it off and I'm just going to deal with home. But I start out and I would say my percent of probably is like 5% or less that I actually go through that. So I don't balance it. I just do it because it's part of me. And you do what you have to do and you do it when you have to do it and you get it accomplished. So I don't, I can't say that I balance it well, but I manage to get it done what I get done.
For me, I've had the opportunity to do both local, regional, and national advocacy work. And I think it's really great. Evalina and I both this summer were able to lobby in DC for environmental legislation, which was an incredible experience. And it was very insightful and really awesome to be at DC and to talk to, our representatives. But I think for me, what has been most impactful and where I can make the most impact is through local advocacy work. I think when you can work in your community and you can make some effective change with the people that you grew up with or with people that you've been able to meet that, live a couple houses down or live in a neighborhood nearby yours, I think that's really impactful. And it's also a lot more accessible for me to go to the Capital in Lincoln instead of going to DC and to be able to make that more interpersonal connection. So either works, but it's really up to your preference and where you think you can give the most energy.
Yes, thank you both. So I think my takeaway from that, at least, is that community is really at the center of this all. I think fostering a community is one of the most important parts because at the end of the day, if you're not accomplishing what you expect, or if you do encounter barriers or obstacles, you always have a group of like minded people to come back to at the end of the day, discuss that with, plan, coordinate. Reanalyze, reassess your goals. And I think that's one of the most important parts of advocacy. So thank you. Okay, next question is for Mia specifically. For young people globally, climate change ranks as one of the number one voting issues or issues in general. And so how do you think that young people in Nebraska view environmental justice in regard to issue priorities and why?
Yeah, so I think it starts out with a young age, just having a great deal of appreciation for our environment, whether it's the Great Plains, the creek in your backyard, or the urban forestry that surround you. I think we all just kind of grow up appreciating nature in the state that we live in. There's a lot of open land if you just, drive 20, 15 minutes out. So I think that is a really good foundation for a lot of young people. Also, just not um, being able to demand change instead of just being complacent with it. That's something that is very unique with a lot of younger generations. And I think it's really awesome to see the way that my peers or, people that are younger than me or older than me were all able to demand change instead of just being complacent. One thing that I think is really important for environmental justice with young people is that we all have unique experiences. So for me, I focus on meatpacking plants because I'm from South Omaha and that's really prevalent in my neighborhood. But if you're from North Omaha, you might, have more experience with a coal power plant. If you're from, all over every single part of Nebraska, they have their unique experiences and their unique aspect to environmental justice and what that means to them. Another thing that I'd like to say is that a lot of politicians in our state are very confused why young people are leaving and they want to talk about property taxes, which to me that makes no sense. I don't even really know much about property taxes, but I have considered leaving because I feel sometimes that my state, the representatives don't value what I value, don't value sustainability and growth and trying to protect our ecosystems. As someone who wants to go into sustainability and renewable energy, it's very hard to envision a future here when something like that isn't even valued, when there's so little opportunity because of lack of growth. So, yeah, I think there's environmental justice and environmentalism overall is very important to young people. And I think it's just very unique in all the ways that we can approach it.
Yes, I second that as a youth. Okay, for Cheryl. So, in the face of reluctance and pushback, you have resiliently held true to your demands in fighting for equity. What are the most powerful tools activists and organizers should use when building movements in a state that opposes or doesn't champion environmental justice efforts?
I want to answer, but can I piggyback on something she said? And I think I really do appreciate this opportunity to be able to be here with you, young people. Um, and I call myself young, elder, okay? But you brought out so many good points here. So for the listening audience on there, and this is what I'm trying to work towards is, and I've had a conversation with several of you here tonight before we started. I wholeheartedly agree is that we need to bring your input in. We need to be able to work generational. And I am very excited about meeting you here tonight and what we can do in the future. Because even though, as I said, politics is right, you just said that, politicians, but there has to be a way that we have to bring everyone into this. So I appreciate that. And I just wanted to say, wholeheartedly agree with you. And so this is like a stepping stone. And perhaps some of those who are watching, they will be coming to with this is how we get things accomplished. And so that kind of goes into what you asked me was, how do I stay true to, and what can you do, or what do I think for an activist and organizer? And one of the first things I think is to listen. We need to listen to each other. There is a difference in listening and hearing. I can hear you, but am I listening to you? And if we're steady jabbering back and forth to each other while we're trying to speak, we're not listening because we're not hearing. So I think one of the things that, and I try hard to, I know sometimes some people might think I'm not listening, but I am, is to listen. I think that's first, is to have engagement. Engagement, you can learn, or I feel like you can learn from everyone, anyone. I always say you can learn from the drunk, because the drunk usually gets home. They may not know how they got home, but you can learn from them. If you follow them, you'll get home. So I think it's just important to start with, like I say, is learn to listen, learn to be engaged, engage in each other, listen to what they have to say. And then you try to build a coalition of different ages, races, genders, and so that's how you get things accomplished and done. Strategize. I try to say, what are our goals? What is it we want? And being sometimes with the ad hoc committee, they go on and we'll have a meeting, and I was like, what is it you want? What do you want from OPPD? They're here listening to what do you want? So I think it's important. Those are things that keep me trying to work towards finding answers or finding solutions. I always believe I want to be part of the solution, not the problem. We identify our problems and then let's work to try to find our solutions to that. I feel like those are the most. So when you're trying to do something state or just in your neighborhood, in your city, whatever it is, if you're kind of get those things together, I think that you can accomplish and resolve. It may not be what you want. And sometimes you find out what you wanted when you started isn't what you want, but you get something else in return. If that answered.
Absolutely. That definitely answers my question. Thank you. Okay, moving on. This next question is for everyone on the panel, but it's no secret that right now environmental justice and just environmental efforts in general are not necessarily being championed by the current federal and we can even possibly say state administration and representatives
and city,
and city, everyone actually. So yes, how do you all remain optimistic that we will continue to champion these sorts of efforts in the face of such a radically opposed administration when we can't get too political because inclusive communities is a 501c3, but you know, feel free to speak your mind to a degree.
I look at it when I read that question and what I wrote down was we don't have a choice. We have to remain optimistic. We have to have hope because without hope, you have nothing. So I think it's kind of like, what do? We have to keep doing, we have to keep trying. We know that we are have an administration that is doing everything possibly to erase almost everything from land to water to history to whatever. That's what they're opposite. But we have to feel like there is some hope. And how do we combine and get that hope so that we can because we can't give up. If we give up, they win. And I refuse to, as they say, go down without a fight. So, if you're sinking in the water because you can't swim, you say, well, I didn't go down. The ship didn't go down without a fight. So I just try to say there is some hope. Some days I'm better at it than I am at other days, but I refuse to give up.
Thank you. Do any of our other panelists, online or in person, have any additional thoughts?
I can go. So first I want to start with a quote that I'll probably butcher, but I got it from David Corbin, who's sitting right there. And it is that true conservatives are the people that care about the planet and their families and they want to protect those things. And the real radicalists are, big oil, big gas companies that want to disrupt those types of things. And so when I think about that, I think of how connected we are because if you ask most Americans, they care about the planet, they care about protecting their family.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to this administration, we're finding that on both sides of the political spectrum, we're all being negatively affected. It doesn't matter anymore about, this side is being affected, but this side is okay now. We're all being affected by these types of legislations that are being passed. But that gives us a unique opportunity to come together and to use all of our different standpoints. One thing that I have learned about is from the Keystone XL pipeline, and they had everybody coming together. They had ranchers, they had, people that cared about the sandhill cranes, they had liberals, they had everyone coming together, and it really their messaging was protect Randy, who was a rancher, and it was protect your neighbor. And I think that's what this comes down to is protecting our neighbors, protecting our planet, and protecting one another, because if the planet is dying, then so are we. And I think that's what gives me inspiration, and that's what makes me hopeful for collective action and to using all of our unique perspectives, because at the end of the day, we all want the same end goal. We want clean air, we want clean water, we want a future for our loved ones.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Sikowis, if you would like to answer that question, feel free, but I'll also segue into our last question for you. Okay, wonderful. Yes. So Nebraska and Iowa are. Oh, okay, perfect.
go ahead and respond to that last question?
Who me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Can you repeat the last question so I can reframe my thoughts?
Yes, it was how do you remain optimistic that we will continue to champion environmental justice in the face of a radically opposed administration?
I don't know if optimistic's the word to use. I think I'm more of a realist, and um, f- for Indigenous peoples, what Trump is doing is business as usual, actually. He's not doing anything that's radical, actually. He's not doing anything that's out of the box or strange. In fact, he is really walking in the footsteps of, his American government ancestors, if you will. There's been a few bright lights of hope. Every once in a while, a president will come through who seems to care about the environment, but in the end, they're still really attacking the environment. They put on a show, but there's still a lot of really bad stuff happening. I've just always looked at it as um, we're just going to continue to do what we do because we care about the land, and the land is very much connected to who we are as a people, as Indigenous people. And there's nothing we can do but continue to fight for the environment and for the land and for the climate and for the people because it's all connected. Environmental justice is really just another word for fighting Christian colonial capitalism, right? So, um, like I just keep telling folks, like just keep your head down and do what you're good at, and continue to build community because we take care of us. Like we help us. Mutual aid is what gets people through these times. It always has and it always will. Um, and we can't, as, disenfranchised peoples who have, only been able to vote, rather recently compared to other Americans, um, uh, we there's an understanding that like this government is not going to there needs to be like some major overhaul before we I feel like this government is actually working for the people and for the land and for the climate. And I think that's going to take um looking at its history at its and like to stop whitewashing history. um and that's a huge ask, and that's something that's going to take a very, very long time. So for now, just keep your head down and keep doing what you're good at, and don't feel frazzled by all the things that are happening. Because you don't want to get distracted and get like taken off task. You got to keep doing what you're good at and keep your community safe.
Thank you. We'll come back to you for another question. So earlier you began discussing a little bit about colonial farming practices and how this has eroded the quality of land and water and soil and air. And so can you just provide some insight on how specifically these practices have been observed in Nebraska and how the land back movement aims to resist land exploitation?
Um, that's a long question. You want me to what you want me to explain how taking care of the land is happening in or sorry, ask that again.
Yeah, if you could explain specifically how we've seen colonial farming practices observed in Nebraska and how the movement you're leading aims to resist these practices.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. So we do most of our work in Iowa, but we do work in Nebraska as well. Um, and we have seen, colonial capitalist farming practices are what are killing us right now. Have you guys heard of Mead, Nebraska, and what happened there? It's a pretty scary, sad story. If you go to our YouTube page, there's actually a really good video on it, like a 6-minute video. Um, we were there on the ground when it happened and got drone footage of it and stuff like that. And that's a good example of where farming is really not farming. It's just it's about production. And Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, they're all sacrifice zones for big ag. And Iowa, I'm just because it's right next door, and I know a lot more about Iowa. Is the number one contributor to the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. It's the and just so you know, just because it's Iowa, that like doesn't mean this isn't happening in Nebraska, right? Because we're not trying to, like, these are just colonial borders, right? These borders mean nothing to the water, to the air, to the soil, to the movement of nature itself. Like these borders mean nothing. So what's happening in Iowa is happening in Nebraska as well. Um, and so I was also the most biologically colonized state in the country. And um, right now, this has the second highest growing cancer rate, which of course affects Nebraska. And, I know the Winnebago Nation has very high cancer rates, for instance. Um, and all of this has to do with big ag, and it was just which is just colonial capitalist farming practices, and also small farms. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, we like to uplift the family farm, but a lot of family farms are also carrying out these types of really bad practices. How we push back at it is through rematriation, which is an ideology and a practice that is focused on, obviously getting land back, but also reclaiming or renewing or regenerating the landscapes that were here, before, and trying to get those roots back in the ground that were taken. Um, the roots that used to be here from the tall grass prairie and the oak savannas and the forest used to be, up to 30 feet deep, and it kept a whole biome in place. It kept the land in place. I don't know if you guys ever go to the Jean Leahy Park in Omaha. But have you ever seen that statue of the man, the woman, and the child, and they're farming and they're holding a basket of roots? That's because that was a big deal back then. It was like to show off how many roots you could take out of the ground, right? And that was really bad because now we're losing all the soil that exists here. We're in really big trouble because of that. And that's 90% of Iowa that's happened to, and most of Nebraska as well, I'm sure. Um, and everything's going into the Missouri and the Mississippi rivers and going downstream. And so um, rematriation is getting indigenous stewardship back into play. Understanding traditional ecological knowledge, bringing back the matriarchy, which is basically empowering the feminine. The toxic patriarchy is really what has harmed us. The toxic patriarchy is what was what colonial capitalism uplifts, and that's what we have to push back at with through ideologies and practices like rematriation. So that's a lot of the work we do, and we're currently in the middle of actually buying our land, our real estate in Iowa City, and creating a resilience and innovation hub. We're also trying to do something like that in Sioux City if we can make it happen, and eventually maybe even Omaha.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, that was our last question. We will just end with a brief call to action. If each of our panelists, starting with Mia, can just share briefly how others can, if they felt uniquely inspired by your story tonight, become involved in work similar to yours. Just a brief 1 or 2 sentences about how people can become involved.
Awesome. Well, first off, I just want to thank you for coming here. That shows a testament to your involvement in advocacy work and involvement in environmental justice. So thank you so much for coming. My greatest tip that I have, lived through my life is to just get out of your comfort zone and to try new things. A lot of environmental things that I would go to, I didn't have anyone to go to with me, so I would go by myself, and that was very scary, but it's really cool because some people will call it networking, but when you go to all these environmental things, you meet environmentalists, and it's really just making new friends because all environmentalists are friendly. So that's something that I really have love to do and has helped me to get a lot more involved. Also, just find your unique voice in action and advocacy, because we can all bring something unique to the table. What the work that I do is completely different from Cheryl, and it's completely different from Evalina. And that's good because we all bring something unique and we all have a unique perspective of how we can create change. This is intersectional work, so we all are here for different reasons, but we all want the same outcome of protecting our planet, protecting our people. I have had the opportunity to work on the Green Amendment, which I've worked with Evalina, I've worked with the Sierra Club, and various organizations, and we are having a webinar on May 6th, I believe. So more information on that to come, but it's a really cool movement to protect, Nebraska have a right to clean air and clean water. So yeah.
Thank you, Cheryl.
My call to action is going to be real direct. Why'd you laugh at that, Dave? Contact me. Here's a little sheet. You can come up later on. I pass it around, sign up, put your name down, telephone number, email address, or anything. As I said before, I want to have a 2025 first ever North and South, because she's already told me she's going to work on South Omaha. So we want to have a 2025 South Omaha and North Omaha Earth Day in September. And I see Eric Williams is out there with OPPD. So I know we got his support and everything. So just call me 402-301-2701. Or I have my email address on here, cwcwomaha@gmail.com. And I will make sure Cammie gets this so she can send it out to everybody who signed up. And not, as you have your little table talks, remember, just sign up on the back, front, whatever. It's irrelevant. Just make sure that we get, because that's the only way we can do it, is if we come collective together and each work on different things. So sometimes, like, being direct right here.
Perfect. Sikowis, would you like to briefly share your call to action?
Yeah, you can sign up on our mailing list at greatplainsaction.org. And I would like to encourage folks to come out on May 3rd in Omaha to the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting. We are part of a coalition called Clean Up Mid-Am, and I put the link in the chat here. You can go to cleanupmidam.com. Like Mid-Am standing for Mid-American. We've been fighting coal plants that are sitting right above the Winnebago Nation, right below Sioux City, and coal plants in Council Bluffs and also in other parts of Iowa for a few years now. And we go to the Berkshire Hathaway meeting every year in protest. This year on May 3rd, we decided to do something a little more chill and educational. So starting around 1 o'clock, we'll be at the Big Elk statue behind the health center by the river, having a picnic lunch and doing a teach-in and a water ceremony to pray for the water, because the Missouri River is in really big trouble, very big trouble. And we don't actually have a post up yet for it. It's a long story. People are doing a lot right now. Let me just put it that way. But if you go to cleanupmidam.com or you go to Great Plains Action Society and you follow our socials, we should have something up in the next day or two with more information about that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, those were all of our questions.
Yes. Round of applause for our panel. Good.
Able to have that local control and is important, because who knows better than the ones who lived there for centuries on how to manage the land. And so moving towards that as a country and giving more policy changes at the local level rather than all this federal jurisdiction would be a better way of doing things. And then we kind of touched on at the end, we talked about the frustration of trying to find balance between the environmental policies and the economic policies, because oftentimes that's where they get pitted against each other. And how do we find balance with that? Because oftentimes one political group will use economics as a way of counteracting the environmental policies. So then the environmental policies take a back seat to that. So we have to find ways to connect and say there's immediate benefits to doing these changes economically, not just down the road, but immediate, because those are oftentimes the arguments that are made against it. So
Great. Thank you so much. Our last two tables. Back there.
We discussed a few things. Pollution was one of the big things we talked about. The bigger companies polluting, our environments, and then they have the fines and punishments are really like just a slap on the wrist for them. They have budgets for the law that they know they're going to break. We also spoke on advocacy from the younger generations. We have to get more involved because we are the ones that'll be left with the mess. So whether we're not thinking about it now, it's going to affect us in the long run. So getting involved and being more aware as the younger generations on the environmental policies. So
Great. Thank you so much. And to our last group here, and I'm going to ask you for like 8 extra minutes. I know we're a little over 7:30.
Yeah, we obviously talked about a lot of the same things. We started off with just talk about some of the actual environmental tragedies that are still affecting us today. So the lead in the soil that's rampant in Omaha, and also the lead that was just throughout the entire country as we were using leaded gas up until the 80s. And then the impact of fertilizers. I just had an example the other day that was just kind of like, well, if that's making that plant look like that, what's it doing to me? And then we started speaking same thing about youth and how do we support them? How do we reach out to them? How do we disseminate some of this information? We had a great person at our table today who was very, very well versed in horticulture and best practices with plants. So it was really awesome to get some of that information we didn't know about, kind of what indigenous plants are or what they're not, and kind of what we need to grow to benefit the soil and the environment around us. So that would definitely be that older generation giving the younger generation the tools that they need to make the decisions that they need to make, because they have the energy to go out and do the fighting. And I think that came down to just the courage to stand up and be open to others, and let people know the issues that need attention, but doing it in a way that people are going to listen. I think that's the best thing about these table talks that we have here is everybody's voice is equal and everybody can hear and be heard. Because generally we get into a lot of political turmoil and we piss each other off and we all run away rather than sitting at the table and trying to work it all out. So I think that's the best thing that we can do is just try to care about the people as we care about the land, so we can all care about everyone else. And I think the only other thing, there was a thing about regenerative Nebraska that was kind of talking about practices that are trying to be helped when it comes to regenerative agriculture. I think that got touched on in the panel as well, and how we can kind of get away from these colonial gardening practices that we were talking about.
Great. Thank you all so much. So thank you for participating in this table talk. And as we said, this is our last one that we will be hosting, but hopefully not the last one ever. So we will send an email out with resources that were shared by the panelists today and some things that came up. If you did not put your email address down, please make sure you did that, but on your tables, and we'll put a link in on the online as well, or we'll also send out in the email that goes out to you, but please do the evaluation. This is still super important for us. So there's QR codes. If you need printed ones, we do have printed ones for you as well. But please fill that out. There's food. We have to-go boxes. And also, if you didn't get a chance, Shirley from Heartland Workers Center is here registering folks to vote and giving voting information. We do have a municipal city election here. So if you are able to vote in Omaha, please don't forget, May 13th is the general election here. Thank you all so much for your time. Take some food, do the evaluation, and enjoy your evening.